A quick question before we start. When you were playing Infamous, did you ever find yourself thinking, man, I really wish this was a budget imitation BioWare game set on Mars? Because if your answer is yes, then you're in fucking luck. Right off the bat, I'll say that I enjoyed Mars Warlogs, and granted I do mean that in the same way that I enjoyed the movie Ghost of Mars. A lot less whenever Ice Cube wasn't on screen. Really though, for some games it does become clear when, for better or worse, the developers like it, and when I get that feeling, I tend to cut the game some slack and try to appreciate it. It's by no stretch good, but fortunately it's bad in amusing rather than frustrating ways. It's one of those janky games that's just broken and silly enough. So, after doing 2 playthroughs, one good and one evil, I honestly believe that the developers made something at least near to what they wanted and that they like it. Plus, I did find out there is a sequel of sorts coming out a few days from now, so you know, they have faith in the setting. That said, I can only recommend it if you want to burn some money on some cheap laughs, because despite being an RPG, it's not a time sink either. You'll need 7 to 10 hours spare. If you're expecting an in-depth journey tens of hours long, throw away that notion right now. It's more like a bizarrely overpowered twat bumbling from town to town for a little bit solving problems. And as always, I'm going to spoil essentially everything anyway. The world of Mars Warlogs is Mars, during a war. Humanity colonised it some time ago, but then Mars moved a smidgen closer to the Sun. This made the surface near completely uninhabitable, cut off communication between Earth and Mars, a bunch of people who suffered exposure turned into mutants, and in contrast, some people learned how to shoot lightning. Water became incredibly scarce, so much so that the ruling classes are now water guilds ran by leaders called dowsers. And save for growing crops, no one is making anything new. Everyone is scavenging the tech left behind by the first colonists. It's at this point everyone picked up sticks and started hitting each other. All of this invariably killed the tourism industry. There are 4 water guilds running the planet, but only 2 of them really come up. Aurora and Abundance. Aurora has a custom of virtue names which, the more you learn about, the more you will side with Abundance.
First name, last name, former job.
Innocence Smith. Apprentice electrician.
Innocence? Shit, I'll never get used to these names.
Honestly, Earth probably did figure out some time ago that it could contact Mars, but then it saw what was going on and decided not to. It's on this dry, barren shithole that we join Innocent Smith on his way to POW Camp 19. As he tells us, he had a pretty easy life, just hanging about with friends and doing basically nothing. That was until the Water Wars started, and he was drafted into Space WW1 between Aurora and Abundance. The other 2 water guilds really don't come up, and they're likely better off. Actually, Aurora is the only one that gets any depth at all. All we really learn about Abundance is that they run a prison camp somewhere, and now Innocence is there. So, connecting the dots, he wasn't very good at his job, and I really don't want to play as someone called Innocence to begin with. Arriving at Camp 19, everyone is sent to the sand showers to get cleaned up, and the only Cockney on Mars is a fat rapist known only as Fatso, and he's waiting there for Innocence.
Get a load of this, fellas. Fresh meat. This just makes my day. I was getting tired of drilling the same old asses. Hey, you're not bad looking either. Get out. Yeah, you got a good, pretty mouth.
But before anything can happen, a mute walks in and starts damaging his own clothes.
You just won't stop yakking, will ya? Spit it out, you got something to say.
And this causes Fatso to back down.
Just thinking about what you're gonna do to this poor bitch brings a tear to my eye. I just can't watch. I'm sensitive.
The mute then walks in, stops being a mute, and takes his place as the actual player character.
Hey, thanks. Thanks for the help.
Establishing himself pretty quickly as a world-weary, irreverent, fighty bloke.
And what makes you think I'm not just a better-looking fatso? You give your trust too easily. It's a bad habit if you want to stay alive in here.
Innocence decides right away to stick to this guy like glue, since he's the player character, and we can immediately see, upon talking to the first available side quest guy in the next room over, that Innocence is not very smart.
I'm not too busy just now. Can I give you a hand?
Why help the mechanic? I mean, even if he seems alright, he's still an enemy.
Yeah, just say that right there next to him. So, PC gets to introducing himself, and reveals that he dropped his virtue name of Temperance. He decided he'll be known simply as Roy.
Afraid so. They called me Temperance back then, but I chose Roy. Those virtue names aren't really my thing.
Oh, okay. I guess Temperance doesn't fit.
Right, listen here, fuckboy. I've not been drinking. I've put up with your stupid name for 5 minutes. Give me some credit.
Kid.
Truth be told, I knew Roy would be the main character from the get-go, since the guide on the main menu pretty much spoils it. Having left the showers, it turns out Fatso had just gone to find a more scenic spot for the combat tutorial. So we break out, that, and start fighting. The combat feels like a bizarre halfway meeting between Arkham and Dragon Age. A weird meld to start with. Our basic combat options are a button to attack, a block break, a block, and if you block at the last second you'll do a parry, opening up enemies for a counter-attack, and lastly a dodge roll. There's also a hotkey bar with only 4 icons, despite the fact you can have up to 9 abilities equipped at a time because the UI guy seriously underestimated Roy. This is where your cooldown abilities go, and when I get to them, you'll learn how they break the game. So, the combat can feel a little bit tricky at first due to how janky it is. It is real-time combat. You click, a random hit animation is selected, which is something I'm really starting to tire of, due to the fact that I generally like to know how quickly I'm going to hit something, and I don't care if Roy wants to throw in a twirl. Meanwhile, enemies throw hits, and you have to block them, rather than hope for random odds of a miss. However, it's still an odd meeting between real-time fighting and an RPG, meaning you can be hit by enemies out of range, or whilst dodge rolling. Enemies also block and dodge entirely at random, and while you do have a block breaker, if they're dodging, your only option is to not hit them for a moment. Stand still and wait for them to calm down, which is not what I'm here to do. I mean, you can throw sand in their eyes, I guess, but some of these cheeky cunts brought glasses. Essentially, to get good at the combat in this game, you have to become the jank. Health regens mid-fight, and while enemies can hit you at a distance, you can still get out of range. So if you're ever in a jam and you're without health packs, just fucking dodge roll. Roll until refreshed and get back in there. Tap block repeatedly. Fuck it, roll and tap block repeatedly if you want. There's no downtime before you can go back to a defensive state. I call this martial arts technique tap parrying, and the denizens of Mars are helpless to resist it. Their only counter is to land a hit in the frames-wide opening. This stuff will see you through fights alive, but once we actually start unlocking abilities, then we'll start getting too broken for the game to keep up. My second playthrough I put zero thought into combat and basically curb-stomped Mars. The first time around was much the same, it just had a longer wind-up. The weird mishmash between RPG-based chance to hit, combined with real-time attacking and blocking, sits in a middle ground that doesn't have the stats to make the RPG elements have any depth or strategy, and the brawler-paced combat lacks the speed or precision to make the game feel really skillful. I think it really should have leaned further towards a straight-up brawler, rather than trying to mix and match. Now, it does help that I like this kind of flavour of combat as well. I won't deny, brutal post-apocalyptic scraps with few or weak guns and improvised melee weapons, it's a strange niche that I absolutely love. So there is that, and I won't deny it makes me like the combat more than I should. So, Fatso is beaten down, the guards intervene, and Roy... Are you alright, mate? That was a level up. But I'm not spending any of my points just yet, since of the 3 level up paths, 2 are mostly boring, 1 is useless, and the 3rd is locked. Roy, having seen the raw power of Innocence in a fight, asked him to tag along in a jailbreak he's planning. Innocence agrees, and deciding they need a more secluded spot to discuss the plan, they go and talk about it smack bang in the middle of the mess hall. So, get guns, shut off the defense systems near the train terminals, break into the cistern and nick some water for the trip, and incite a distraction while we steal a train and bugger off. Some of these are tied to side quests, but luckily I did all of those before we got here, such as finding out why Bob the guard is depressed.
You don't want to talk about your problems.
Listen, it's all real nice, gotta admit. But can you tell me how it's any of your business?
And then it turns out he's instrumental to the escape. He'll tell you how to break into the cistern, And the only way to fix his problem, by the by, is to confess to a guard that you're planning to break out, and he'll decide to tag along.
I'm thinking about escaping by taking the train.
You insane? And I guess you want to go back home. What would I do there?
I've thought of everything, and once we're out of here, we can split up on a shadow path and you can go back home.
The mutants, nicknamed the Dust, well, they're treated even worse than the regular POWs, and a revolt is already brewing.
Attention! To the Dust Rebel who hit a guard! If you don't give yourself up, we will shoot 10 of your brothers!
In fact, a guard has been recently attacked by one, and the rest of the small Dust commune is trying to hide the perpetrator. By figuring out who that is, we can blackmail them into timing their revolt with our breakout. Or just talk them nicely into it, they're going to revolt either way. Innocence pretends to be a naturally talented electrician, and despite having been here for about 20 minutes tops, good minds are needed, so he's allowed to work in the security wing of the prison he's in.
We'll put you in the power plant. For once, we'll have somebody remotely qualified for it.
Prisoners can sign up to kill moles in the nearby mine, and since this prison has already shown itself to be pretty lax, they're loaned guns to do the job.
I came to get a gun.
Here. The charges are fully loaded, so you shouldn't have any problem with the ammo.
Despite being armed, a few of the prisoners fucked up and died, so Roy goes on in and stashes those leftover guns for later. So, it should be pretty clear by now, this prison is great. The prisoners are fed, they get water, they can even keep their own gardens. I've spent all my time in jail faffing around just doing odds and ends, found some parts for a mechanic, dealt with an outbreak of rabies infecting the guard dogs. This is by no stretch of the imagination a dull, unfulfilling day. This is the nicest place you see in the entire game, and I don't get Roy wanting to leave. It's fucking lovely. I mean, sure, Innocence had a rough start. Meeting the only Cockney on Mars would be a fright. But he promptly got beaten up and everyone here hates him. And everyone loves Roy for smashing his face in.
He was embarrassing the entire Aurora army. Here, take this. A little thank you.
Huh, thanks.
You shouldn't have. A majority of the guards are cunts, sure, but so's everyone on this planet. At least here it's nothing personal, it's just part of the job description. And I mean, sure, the mutants may be treated worse than regular POWs, but think about how little that must mean. They're beaten and looked down upon. Again, no different from anywhere else. But here, they have a gate. We've got basically zero oversight as well. The guards simply can't be roused. Whilst nabbing the guns down in the mine with blokes called Sobriety and Courtesy,
Roy, if you need a hand for a job or something, you know where to find me, right?
who we will never meet again, we come across a tunnel with relics, old shit left behind by the first colonists. And so the three prisoners go and report this. It's by doing so we get a meeting with the head of the camp, a Technomancer named Sean. He sends us back down there with his apprentice Mary to investigate the relics.
A lot of people would have just mistaken it for drilling machinery. What did you do before the war?
Well, what the...
The museum trip is interrupted when a mole queen turns up and nearly pulls the TPK. Luckily, the ever-competent Roy is able to smash eggs and dodge roll until Mary can get back up and collapse the tunnel.
We need a powerful shock to collapse this tunnel or that thing will follow us.
But what about the relics?
So, that gained us nothing.
Exactly what to do. How is it that you know so much about the powers of technomancy?
I worked with one, once. Nothing more.
Is that so?
Save for the suspicion of Sean and Mary, considering that Roy knows about relics and technomancy and most of the planet are basically dunces.
A smart prisoner. This camp is chock full of surprises.
So, as you can see, Technomancers are the mages of this setting. They can slowly shoot electricity, make bubble shields and run electric currents through their weapons. The denizens of Mars, being good sports, have made sure to wear scrap metal for their armour. They also get a bunch of privileges in society and something approaching an education. But on the other hand, you are shipped off to a place called the Source and raised in a lightning-powered cult. So it swings and roundabouts, really. So, after solving pretty much all of this prison's problems, it's time for our breakout. Some bloke we got info from along the way called Jay wants in, and well, since we've already okayed one of the guards, why not? The revolt begins. The mutants rise up. It's a mutiny. Yep. Just hold this fight. Just hold this shot. It's a big combat sequence, wrecking our way through the kind of sparse train station. With little to stand in our way and the guards caught by surprise, we...
I'm hurt. I can't go on. Go on without me.
Oh, hey, didn't see you there, Bob. Well, alright then. You sound like you're pulling a sickie, but, you know, I'll take your word for it. We run into Sean, and a fight ensues. So let's make the kid feel like he's contributing and figure out why the Technomancers are so feared. Turns out I still don't know, they're kind of like regular enemies, but they stand around a lot more, imitating their favourite anime. I mean, for one thing, they can shoot lightning, but this setting has guns. They may be nail guns, and the rifles may be unwieldy, but we still got fucking guns! They're jumped up human plug sockets, and everyone on this planet is just buying into the hype.
Damn, you killed a Technomancer. I didn't think it was even possible.
Of course you can kill them. They're human beings, you know?
Okay, jokes aside, this boss is actually tricky the first time around. I mean, he's no different from every other Technomancer that follows in this game, even down to him having goon backup. And once you work out that they're insanely slow and easy to bait, and at range they're very easily dodged, they actually become easier than normal enemies for the most part. Except when they do that. Kind of annoying, just puts the fight on hold for 20 seconds. Anyway, with Sean dead, Roy picks up his techno glove, and Innocence is confused.
It'll give us a better chance to escape.
You gonna sell them?
Shit. Never thought I'd put these things back on.
Put them back on? Roy, what are you saying? You know how to use these things?
Yes. Now let's go.
Granted, I knew before then. I learned about it on the main menu. It was pretty obvious I'd get these powers besides. So with that done, Roy, Innocence and Jay book it for the train. But the guards are hot on their heels, and someone has to buy time, even if it spells death. Roy steps up, but Jay has other ideas.
You keep an eye on the kid. You guys are almost family.
I've known this kid for 3 hours, you melodramatic fuck. And then he dies. Mary swears revenge on Roy, but honestly, if she was just his apprentice, I'm not too worried. And with that, Roy and Innocence jump on the train and escape. Chapter 1 is down, and time-wise, the game is 1/3 over.
He'll pay for this, I swear.
That's also the hardest chapter cleared. I'm not kidding, the rest of this game is a joke compared, particularly to the system dungeon and the mines. A lot of this does come down to getting used to the game's awkwardness in this chapter, plus a lower health pool, less moves, less health items, and honestly, the moles are likely the toughest enemy in the game, and it's in this chapter that they're the most numerous. All you've really got here are your basic combat moves, a bunch of sand, and whatever mines and grenades you can get your hands on and save for the hardest moments. I spent ages in the system, dodge rolling around slowly regenning health. But from here on out, after we board this train, beating up the rest of Mars will be pretty simple. What follows is a very brief explanation of getting to Shadowlayer, alongside more than a bit of gushing.
Roy's strength and bravery are only equaled by his biting cynicism. He takes down enemies as if they were poor jokes in lack of a good punchline.
I call this the Roy is great cutscene. To me, Roy hasn't really been much of a character up to this point. He's just been a stronger metal bard than everyone else. He used to be a Technomancer at the source, but he wasn't a fan of the oppressive atmosphere and insane co-workers, so he decided to go AWOL, becoming a traveller and mercenary of sorts. And at some point, loving freedom and all, I guess he decided to join the military. And the most unbelievable beat of this story, he got captured. I did expect the story to become a journey across Mars, essentially, going from place to place solving problems, not just jumping into the big narrative arc, and instead working our way back to home territory in Aurora. But no, we pretty much smooth sailed back home to a town called Shadowlayer. And in the interlude between escaping prison and here, the titular war ended.
Aurora seems to have won the war, and both sides are demobilizing troops.
So this game could just be called Mars. Innocence's parents lived here, and were members of a rebellion called the Militia, so that's our first port of call. After all the war these characters wanted to get away from, they've decided to go with the much chiller experience of a violent internal uprising. It's also at this point we unlock the Technomancer upgrade path, and now I'm going to talk about leveling skills and abilities. We've got 3 upgrade branches, and to unlock higher tiers, you have to put in a certain amount of points. So this pretty much means that you should specialise, but you can push at least 2 branches pretty far. Let me save you some time. There's a combat tree, a stealth and crafting tree, and the aforementioned Technomancer tree. Fuck stealth and crafting. Just grab the mildly incongruous plus 25 health from it, and never come back. In a post-apocalypse scenario, who would you rather be? The man who can sneak around some scuffles, or the man who could beat an entire planet to death? I mean, you do get bonuses to stealth in here, more easily crafted grenades and mines, and the gun gets a damage boost. But all of that stuff requires ammo. A pike never needs ammo. Plus the situations in which stealth is a valid option are limited. Sometimes you walk through doors and right into the eyes of enemies, and I doubt you can upgrade stealth enough to bamboozle your way out of this one. Meanwhile, blunt force trauma is always viable. Meanwhile, by popping points right into combat or technomancy, you can become unstoppable quite early into Chapter 2. In fact, I did it accidentally the first time around and just ran with it. This all said, most of the upgrades are actually quite dull. There's small meaningless stat boosts you pop points into to rank up to the fun stuff. I'm talking about things like a longer dodge roll, plus 5% overall damage or damage resistance, you know, plus 25 health. The only amusing thing is that crit chance racks up so ridiculously that by the end of the game nearly half of your attacks are criticals. And you have things like boosted crit chance after dodge rolls or during Technomancer attacks to make it even more ridiculous. Then we have things like using up only half of your Technomancer juice to put the world in slow motion around you, or running electricity through your weapon. And as you upgrade this further, it ups crit chance and regains juice on crit. And then you combine this with slow motion, so you can be near perpetually faster and stronger than everyone else. Plus health and juice refill between fights, so you don't even have to worry about being conservative with this. My first playthrough I mainly threw lightning bolts and energized my weapon. This curb stomped everyone. My second playthrough, I electro-punched myself in the heart to open every fight, and this went worse for everyone else. Save for some sore ribs, there were no drawbacks. Other Technomancer abilities such as lightning bolts, force push and bubble shield mean very little compared to shit like this. Basically, you go from throwing sand in people's faces to amped up max pain within the span of about 4 hours and only get more power fuck from there. Not to mention, save for one boss fight later on down the road, we've also faced every type of enemy the game has by this point. A majority of humanity have gone for one-handed clubs and knives, maybe with a cheeky gun stashed away somewhere. Some inventive few have gone for a shield to back that up, or a rifle that is somehow worse than the pistol. And then we've got people with power gloves, who explode on defeat. Kinda uselessly, since it doesn't do much, kinda like everything they did in life. Then we've got the non-human enemies, moles and dogs. Moles are basically humans who are immune to having sand thrown in their non-existent eyes, and differing sizes to denote relative health and strength. So, humans with eyewear are basically moles. Dogs are the easiest enemies in the game by a country mile. They're not very aggressive, and their one defensive gimmick, the fact that you have to hit them from behind to do damage, is not very hard to pull off. The moment you're behind them, easily accomplished by running or rolling if you're feeling a bit flashy, they basically just give up and die. Likely because Roy is the only person on Mars to realise this, making them conversely the hardest enemy for allies and NPCs to fight. So to meet the one man who worked it out likely means that they lose their will to live on the spot. And that's it. Humanity has become stagnant and unimaginative, and the wildlife consists of 2 really shit creatures. The combat does quickly become repetitive, and in a quasi-RPG, having a small enemy pool, none of whom have any unique quirks that force differing strategies beyond just non-stop pummeling, really does exacerbate that issue. and this repetition is not helped by the fact that enemies in the hub worlds respawn, but only if you loot their corpses. Mars follows a killer's keeper's rule, so touching the bodies would likely be rude. All in all, however, I did enjoy the combat. Not because it was good, however. I was enjoying it from the perspective of having snapped it in half. And my second playthrough, my primary concern was figuring out the quickest way to become broken and pushing it a step further. I did play on normal both times, and this game does have difficulty options, so I don't doubt that there is a more challenging game in here, but I fail to see how it could become anything other than the same game but longer, unless there's also greater enemy variety and AI in there. And on that note of hub worlds, well, the positive is that they're pretty small, about 3 minutes running tops to get from one end to the other across multiple maps. The negative is that they're also visually all the same. The prison looks like Shadowlayer looks like the next hub, and so on. They've tried to make up for the ease of navigation by sprinkling the maps with pointless doors and ladders so that you get mini cutscenes every few steps. It's kind of impressive that they have plopped down the option to skip these mini cutscenes, so you get miniature fade to blacks every so often if you skip them. To summarise, Mars is a giant favela. After the Roy's great cutscene, we're at the entrance to Shadowlayer, and before we can get to Innocence's home, we have to get through the incredibly understanding border guards. Pro tip for any abundant spies, just say you were at a prison camp.
This is gonna sound like science fiction to you, but I managed to escape from Abundance's prison camps.
Those bastards. They make me sick. They sure gave us hell on the battlefield. But we still took Green Hope. And where were you? Which camp? Do you happen to know Prowess Martin? You actually saw him before you left? How is he? I mean, he's my sister's fiancé, so, you know.
Life is hard in those camps, you know? Very hard. And I believe he's among the ones who've been taking it very badly.
Fuck.
A short while later we arrive at Innocence's home to find it's been burnt to the ground. Innocence asks Roy if his parents are dead, and my response options are yes, yes, or maybe. Morality is meaningless in this game, and right now I'm either blunt Roy or sugarcoating Roy. The morality in this game is very simplistic, and it really doesn't tie into much. Good characters get a 50% discount at all stores in the game, but the choices you get to gain positive morality are so few and far between that you won't see that bonus until pretty far in. So much so that by the time you get it, you'll be geared up and money will be no object anyway.
Get lost, fucker.
Meanwhile, evil characters get bonuses to wounding foes, and they can intimidate their way out of more situations more easily. But if I'm evil, why wouldn't I just brutalize my way out?
And you're not worth the effort, so I'm just gonna beat the shit out of you.
Evil and good choices also are not really telegraphed, which I don't actually find being negative, it's just noteworthy. This game could have really just thrown away morality and not been any lesser for it. Just base what happens and how people respond to you on choices made. Such as when these border patrol guards I lied to come looking for me because they find out what actually happened to Prowess.
Cause, you know, I just heard he was killed in his prison camp by some prisoner named Roy. Funny, isn't it?
In my next playthrough I beat the guards down there and then and spared them the pain of finding out about their dead friend. My favourite part of the morality system, and probably my favourite bit of world building in this entire game, comes in the form of serum. It's the currency of Aurora. Potentially all of Mars. In the mole mines in the first chapter, we find a serum syringe. After a fight, you haven't actually killed anyone, but you can extract serum from them, killing them and earning a measly 5 serum. This is not even half of the required amount to buy the cheapest metal tube. You got that? You ain't worth half a lead pipe. That's every person. 5 serum. Extracting and killing is of course considered an evil action, so there are 2 steps to looting, if you'd like. You can't get serum from animals, I might add, only humans. This means that, even as a good guy, I'm walking around with tens of dead people in my wallet. That's pretty metal. And besides, I'm not being evil, I'm just stimulating the economy. I'm a financially responsible warrior. On my evil playthrough, I liquidated the Shadowlayer Guard Regiment repeatedly, and ironically I was in the black for doing so. Outside of Innocence's torched house, Innocence is feeling sad. And then...
You there! You're under arrest!
Abundance?
Stop right there!
Fucking border patrol. Roy murders his way deeper into Shadowlayer. and manages to shake them off at the highly trafficked ladder into town. Elsewhere, a Technomancer, who can control energy with his mind, but never really bothered to learn commas, contracts a bounty hunter named Tenacity to hunt down Roy.
His name's Temperance, but he calls himself Roy. He refuses to join us, he's a renegade. He must be careful, it's said that he's armed.
Armed? You think I usually go after Boy Scouts? Anyway, I know this Roy. I didn't know he was a renegade. We even worked together back in the day.
Roy, meanwhile, nabs one of his old safe houses, and next on the itinerary is tracking down the remaining members of the militia. He goes to an old contact named Charity, and she looks after the local prostitutes, and seems to know a little bit of everything going on. She wants favours for favours, and does need time to track down the militia regardless, so in return, we go and find one of her girls who went missing, saving her from an abusive pimp.
Listen, leave me alone. He'll kill me if you keep this up. He beats me every day, where it can't be seen.
I don't think you get my drift. You let her leave, and I don't kick your head in. That's my offer.
Oh, you really think a shithead like you's gonna scare me?
You little fuck. That was a big mistake. One I was hoping you'd make. I talked to your pimp.
His corpse is 5 feet that way, Roy. There's no need to be coy. So with that, we get our in with the militia.
You're gonna be so proud of good old Charity. I found the Resistance, or at least a way to get in touch with them. They have an informer in a bar in the North neighborhood. Guy who organizes arena fights.
But before we go do that, I do all of Charity's side quests. I need Dosh for a nice new lead pipe and some new rags. Sorry, Innocence. Don't be mad, stop blocking the shot. I know you want to join up and avenge their demise. But well, your parents aren't getting any deader and I've got to be in vogue. On that note about shopping, only ever buy shit with upgrade slots. I mean, they start mildly worse than any complete gear, but become ridiculously better. And here's another thing, you never need to actually buy the best gear, it's usually hidden in the hub worlds and as side quest rewards. Money's also pretty plentiful, so it really does come down to how lazy you feel. Enemies only drop crafting materials used for these upgradable items, plus usable mines, grenades, and nailgun ammo, which I find a bit dull. I prefer finding weapons and armor, but this game does not have the variety to do that in the first place. And so long as you loot every corpse and find a decent number of very poorly hidden piles of junk and boxes in the world, you'll have enough money left over to buy whatever leftover crafting materials you'll need to max everything out. Aside from anything else, one of my key issues with this game is a lack of interesting items. There are two kinds of expendable weapons, save from the gun. The only melee weapon type are one-handed clubs and blades. There are only two status effects, one being a stun achieved via upgraded parries and certain other moves, and wounded, a health drain and slowdown achieved via bladed or upgraded weapons. The variances in armor are tiny. For the most part, you're best off focusing on just straight up upgrades, since the other minor effects are so tiny and negligible that it's pointless. I mean, aside from electrical resistance, which is also pointless because Technomancers are rare and useless. The item selection feels like it was made for an engine test, not even a budget title. You can also recycle or combine lesser crafting items into better ones, but to get the good stuff you need to spend level up points on a trait for it, and to even get that trait, you have to recycle a lot of weapons and armor, of which you are given very little, meaning you have to spend money on stuff just to break it. It's both uneconomical and poorly thought out. By the time you'll have this trait, you'll have the money to just buy the good stuff instead, if needed, and not to mention by this time, you'll likely have slow motion and lightning powers as well. It doesn't help that the crafting and recycling menus are also clunky and slow. You can't do anything in multiples, for instance, and the moment you do anything, you are booted back to the start of the crafting menu. Plus, if you're evil, you'll never need recycling anyway, since you'll have killed more people than the sun, and thus have a pretty damp wallet to just buy crafting components, if you haven't already gotten enough from the dead people. Essentially, it feels like no effort was put into the menus, both in terms of presentation or convenience. However, and this is a kind of shitty way of putting it, two wrongs have made a bit of a right, in that there is so little required micromanagement that you won't have to deal with the menus very long anyway. Luckily the side quests are pretty enjoyable. They do a good job demonstrating the key issues affecting each settlement, from the crumbling infrastructure and tensions of Camp 19 to the criminal underworld of Shadowlayer, particularly when it comes to drug use and trafficking. The side quests aren't exactly plentiful, and that is actually to the game's benefit. What is there is generally well thought out and delivers a small side story, and save for one quest in Camp 19, it's not just picking up random garbage littered around the world. Granted, the big long side quests of each area follow a pretty standard layout. They go like this. You're presented with a violent solution that is kinda iffy or morally dubious.
From what I've seen, you're not the kind scared of duking it out with scumbags.
I'm not planning on making a career out of it.
For example, a workshop that a bunch of drug-addicted kids are hiding in, away from their violent dealer.
What? Who are you?
Delivery man? I got an order to deliver a dozen kicks in the ass at this address. Won't take long, promise.
You can either just kick the shit out of them and get the workshop back to its annoyed owner, or go on a bunch of conversations working your way up the drug dealer's hierarchy until you can beat up the source of the problem. It isn't really ambiguous what the good thing to do is here. Beat up disaffected youth or exploitative drug dealers. How about the violent, diseased dogs at prison camp? Bearing in mind that we don't know if humans can be infected, killed a lot of the dogs and cut it off early, or go around trying to work out who has the smarts to make a vaccine.
Alright, give me that shit and get out of here. I need to be alone.
Essentially, being evil or absolutely pragmatic is just a way of cutting off further content for yourself, not to mention less rewards and EXP overall. For a surprise though, this game does have a really good escort mission. It takes 5 minutes tops, and you can still clear the mission, albeit with a lesser outcome, if the carrier you're escorting dies. You just pick up the stash of money he was transporting and decide whether to finish the job or pocket it. Getting him through alive does entail a bigger reward, however.
And you never felt like running off with the takings? Honesty?
The old joke about virtue names, huh? Just so you know, there actually are virtuous people among Aurora.
Of course, but you could have had other virtues than the ones you're named after, like pragmatism, unpredictability,
or tenacity, or parsimony, or frugality, or fatso.
These aren't virtues.
They're not fucking names either! Depending on the outcome of certain quests, you can actually get further quests. For instance, if you beat up one of the people harassing Innocence's girls and kill him, she'll give you another job, because hey, you're not above getting your hands dirty. In Shadowlayer, you do also have a side quest to get an ID to move freely around. You can ignore doing this if you want, just means you have to beat up the entire guard of Shadowlayer. Again, and again, and again. You know what? You people can at least look impressed. The Resistance are operating out of the only bar in town, situated deep in the slums, far beyond a group of people who will attempt to kill you on sight since that's about the only affordable hobby. All this tells you about the Militia is that they've got a great taste in real estate. The barman says he'll test if we're a government spy by putting us into a pit fight that he runs, so we're made to take on a mole queen. You know what? Killing this thing doesn't prove that I'm not a spy. It just kinda proves that if I am, you're fucked either way. The Militia recruiter and leader Marco doesn't take too well to Roy, seeing as he thinks all Technomancers are unstable.
I bet he could get his place back at the source if he turned us in.
I doubt it. They know me too well and want me alive. They know I'm not made for the source.
Roy won't betray you. They want him too. Please, you have to listen.
Despite Roy's arguments and Innocence's pushing, Marco won't budge.
Please, Roy, let me try and convince them that you're an honorable man. Just give me some time.
And then an explosion is heard outside. The Militia sod off, Innocence in tow, and Roy decides to go and investigate the blast. So, we get there, and it turns out that Mary exploded. I guess Marco's got a point.
The Technomancers are too unstable.
And this is another reason why Technomancers fucking suck. Roy takes her back to his hideout so she can recover. She awakens and goes right into revenge mode, which Roy rather easily talks her down from.
You thought a weak woman would never come after you, didn't you?
Mary. Like you said, your master didn't give us a choice. You're exhausted and really worked up.
I feel weak. But when I got here, I was full of anger and power. What has happened to me?
You had an overload you couldn't get rid of. Young Technomancers are almost never told about things like that.
I can't think of a single good reason why not beyond a sorority prank.
Now you're empty. You should rest.
And it's then that you get the option to either save her or kill her. If you kill her, the cutscene's tone does a complete 180.
You trying to come after me again. Sorry, Mary.
If you spare her, you get your second companion, nearly 2/3 of the way through the game. You do also get a pretty nice follow-up conversation which pretty much decides if she'll treat you like she did Sean, where she was a completely subservient plug socket, or you can tell her to think for herself and exercise free will, something she's likely never been able to do before. That said, beyond this point, she doesn't really develop in any way, forming her own take on the world, and much like Innocence, Roy just becomes her moral compass. I haven't really talked about Innocence outside of cutscenes, have I? Well, the companions in general are pretty lackluster. They come in two flavours, useless and active hindrance. All but one of them are useless. They fight like most enemies do if they were on opiates. They slowly and seemingly randomly lash out at foes, occasionally pulling out a gun and popping off a shot, before charging into melee range to politely ask if it hurt. Mary is the hindrance. Her Technomancer attacks are just as likely to hit you as the enemy. She's a good comrade to bring along if you want to make the combat a bit more of a gamble, kind of like a pub brawl during an earthquake. Plus, to be fair, it's not just you. Enemy Technomancers are equally capable of fucking their mates over. You can only have one active companion at a time, so you can't mix useless and hindrance together. To say companions are entirely worthless in a scrap is a little bit unfair. They do act as a good method of distracting the enemy until they're inevitably KO'd, and best case scenario, you can clean house before that happens. Even if they are knocked out, there are no ramifications. After each brawl, they get up and dust themselves off, so if nothing else, they're decent punch bags, and at times their incompetence will rub off on the enemy. On more than one occasion, I left the last enemy alive while they fought a companion. In every case, they would get bored before the brawl was over, and instead decide to fight the man who just single-handedly beat all of their friends to death. Live bored or die brave, I suppose. You can also talk to them for additional lore and backstory, and since this game doesn't really have the length to break these conversations up with anyone but Innocence, you can learn everything about them and become their best mate or lover within about 5 minutes. So, long story short, Innocence is fucked. A woman named Devotion has wandered into Roy's seemingly shit hideout. She has an invitation to go meet General Honor Grant, a high up in the Aurora military and a personal friend of the Dowser, so we head off there. Honor Grant has a proposition. He's worried that the Technomancers are getting too powerful, suddenly gaining a ton of sway in government, and his best mate Wisdom, the Dowser, is seemingly involved in this escalation. Honor wants some digging done, but he needs someone to do it off the books. Roy says he needs some time to think about this, and with that, I'm pretty sure we can all feel the big choice of the game coming on. So, back at home, Tenacity has kidnapped Charity, broken into the hideout, and locked her in the bedroom. Roy, did you put up a fucking sign outside?
Attack!
Oh no. Anyway, after beating up Tenacity and his dogs, we get another kill or recruit choice.
You've known me for ages. Why'd you accept this job?
Yeah man, you should feel ashamed. Roy can't even look at you. He's pretty much the evil character, who will judge everything nice you do. He knew that by being hired by the Technomancers, he was essentially dead either way, so his best bet was really just to join Roy, knowing he'll likely win out. So he's a moron for fighting in the first place. So far, our ragtag band of companions has been a symbolic representation.
I never gave them a second thought. I didn't realize they had a sense of injustice like ours.
And two easily swayed turncoats. Plus, it's a good thing that Charity was kidnapped, since while she doesn't know anything right now, she will 100 meters from here. The Militia have launched an attack on a Technomancer convoy, rumoured to be holding prisoners, and Innocence has gone along, hoping his parents will be there. Roy rushes off to make sure it doesn't go too badly. Really could have taken your time. We arrive just as Innocence gets captured.
Innocence! Innocence! Innocence!
I guess I'd better give up. And with that, Roy now has a choice to make. Join the militia or go with Grant. So my options are really fighting government corruption from the outside or the inside. Oh, and Innocence would probably prefer if I go with the militia. Later on we find ourselves in the town of Greenhope. During the war that didn't appear but was supposedly logged, this place was the site of quite a number of battles, costing both sides greatly. It's an agricultural town, currently dealing with a mole infestation affecting the fertile farmland, and the mutant slave labour is stealing food since they're barely cared for. That's all side quests, mind.
And carry bags, and plant grain, and...
I think I see. You do a bit of everything.
Oh no, we decide nothing.
We're here to investigate and disrupt a Technomancer worksite, and once there it's discovered that it has quite a number of pre-war relics. The going theory is that the Technomancers made sure the conflict made it here to give them an excuse to excavate the area. It's far easier than getting permits, you see. In retaliation, the Technomancers ambush a militia meeting. We single-handedly save them. Don't try and prolong your lives, lads. Having nabbed a keycard from one of the corpses, we break into a nearby Technomancer HQ to do some digging, find out what they're up to. Also killing everyone inside. It's from here that we learn of the Shadow Line, a nearby site where experiments are being carried out. Roy, now likely wholly aware he can storm Compound solo and live to speak of it, heads off. We do find experiments being carried out, and they are not pretty. People kidnapped by the Technomancers and exposed to Unit 731 style shit. Good or evil, Roy says he'll bust them out. After beating up most of the facility in search of a key, we run into the comma-free Technomancer, and before he can be dispatched, cutscene Roy is blasted into the way of the one piece of fauna we haven't killed yet. Fucking warned you about the Technomancers. A moment later, the drilling worm is utterly destroyed. Roy clambers out of the tunnel to repeat the feat to the Technomancer. Having found a way to free the prisoners, and with every worker at the Shadow Line having been beaten and likely learned their lesson, Roy decides it's time to head to the source, face wisdom, and settle this. So, who did I side with? Glad you asked. The answer is both of them. The exact same events transpire regardless of who you pick. You do them for slightly different reasons and have access to differing exposition, however. My good Roy went with the militia, my economical Roy went with Grant. If you join the militia, you're joined by Judy, a woman with a single-minded devotion to the militia. If you join Grant, you're joined by Devotion, a woman with a single-minded devotion to Grant. The rebels are trying to dig up dirt on the Technomancers, and when you go to the worksite, you also have to sabotage the dig. Plus, alongside the fact they're trying to deal a killer blow to Wisdom, they also have a mole giving away their location, leading to the ambush. Their leader Marco, as previously established, is a paranoid arsehole with a hatred for Technomancers, particularly Roy.
Well, I was expecting a Technomancer, and here we have two. Two for the price of one. I hope neither of you is planning on stabbing me in the back.
Who would I betray you to? The source is after me too. Just like Roy.
So, I brought Mary into the militia as well and romanced her right in front of Marco, basically just to spite the git. Honor Grant actually has a decent grasp of what is going on, and uses his connections to follow up on Roy's discoveries. He has us defend the militia from the shadows so they can act as a distraction. Again, leading to stopping the ambush. Either way you go, your companion does fuck all to help at the Shadow Line. Did you have fun watching me fight the drill worm? However, Comma-Free Technomancer does turn out to be Devotion's brother, so she doesn't want you to kill him, and this changes nothing. While it is quite lazy and more than a little contrived, the game actually does an okay job framing why we're doing the same things. Going back to the worksite, if you're working with Grant, you exit the site to find that the militia has launched an attack on it, so there is a level of consistency. You raid the Technomancer base for different reasons. For the militia it's to discover the mole's identity, and in Grant's case it's to eavesdrop on Wisdom during his visit, and either way you learn about the Shadow Line. Well, here's the thing actually, you listen in on this conversation either way.
So the work just stopped like that.
A group of terrorists sabotaged the excavation.
In fact, the rebels have more objectives overall. So, speedrunning tip, go with Grant. If you're going just for time, forget about who you actually want to win and just go with that. In both playthroughs, I did kill Marco, which I am proud of. When you out the mold to Marco, he goes kind of turbo cunt.
How could you do this? You've been with us since the beginning.
They've got my family, and they're gonna kill them. I had no choice.
He put our lives at risk, but killing him won't change anything now.
You're wrong, Roy. If we let traitors live, it means we value personal profiteers over the good of the community. So long, Jerry.
The documents I found indicate where his family's being held. They're at a site of a shadow line that's being built.
About 4 seconds too late there, Roy. Well, as you learn at the shadow line, he's not much better, having a contact within the Abundance government.
He spoke to someone called Marco. He said he succeeded.
If we let traitors off the hook, it'll mean the death of the Resistance, remember? And you didn't just betray your side. You betrayed the Guild.
It's not treason. I did it for the good of the Resistance, of Aurora. You can't kill me, Roy. What will happen to the movement without me?
So, after his long spiel, he's killed.
There! Kill him!
By a companion. What a fucking pansy. Meanwhile, if you go with Grant, Marco turns up at the Technomancer HQ mission, accusing you of rejoining the Source, seeming to have missed the entire room full of corpses that Roy created. And Roy doesn't even try and set him straight and instead just kills him. A noble choice. I then extracted serum from the guy to ensure that he's dead. What about Innocence, though? Well, you see, before the Green Hope chapter even begins, the Militia rushes off to save their own from a firing squad.
Judy, we tried everything. We even thought about an all-out attack, but look at that.
And shit, it turns out they have one whole machine gun that's pointed away from us. We'd better do nothing. Meanwhile, Grant pardons Innocence and shoos him out of the plot peacefully in exchange for Roy's assistance. Either way, we lose our innocence. At the Source, our final power is unleashed, having 2 companions. This is how you can tell it's the final showdown, since they're upping the difficulty. I'd better turn all my money into health packs. I could probably get about 40 for it. Yeah, that's alright, cool. And it turns out that you can mix Useless and Hindrance, but only if you're really giving it your all. The final boss is 2 Technomancer enemies and some of their friends, and it's essentially a cakewalk. They don't even have a drill worm or 2 in here. Militia, Roy and Judy arrive in time to find that Grant killed Wisdom in order to spare him from the public lynching he'd receive at the hands of the Militia, and by doing this he'd also save face for Aurora in front of the other guilds. He then submits to a trial held by the Militia, pretty much sure that he's going to face the death penalty despite his status as a war hero. The final choice Roy has is whether to kill Grant there and then or let him face trial.
There's a world to rebuild. The free people of Aurora await!
I have no idea whether this is an improvement, but either way, I have a very bad feeling. Roy, meanwhile, confronts Wisdom alongside Grant. It's revealed in this version of events that the Shadow Line was set up due to Wisdom having contracted a mutation during the war, and he needs to find a cure. Him being a mutant would see him kicked out of office, and he can't hide it forever. And so he went to the Technomancers in order to handle that, and in return, they got to do whatever the fuck they wanted.
What would happen if news of your condition got out? If everyone found out you're a mutant? Yes, you disgust me. But not for the reasons you think. You're going to die, Wisdom. But no one will know of your secret. For Aurora. Goodbye.
Honor kills Wisdom, and yes, I feel like a twat saying that sentence. And then Grant turns on Roy. Before he can pull the trigger though, Roy reveals he left the Mars Warlog with Charity back in Shadowlayer somehow. This bit of undeniable evidence and insurance makes Grant spare Roy and let him leave. So, with no political enemies, Honor Grant will likely become the new Dowser, and then that means that on what is definitely my criminal run of the game, Roy points out that he may have caused a police state, so I fear for the lives of the guards.
And all the criminals, people a bit suspect, and of course, traitors, are systematically arrested.
Roy either drops the log off at the torched home of a dead Innocence, or boards a train to exile himself alongside a freed Innocence, having successfully completed a series of actions I can't fully comprehend the reasoning or causality behind. So that's Mars. I'd describe it as a curiosity. It was definitely enough to make me interested in the sequel Technomancer coming out soonish, if only because I'm hoping for the same amount of half-baked Odyssey, which is unlikely. This is a game that I do like in spite of itself. It's the right sort of cheap imitation, amusing when it can't quite recapture what it wants to. The world is silly and really half thought out, so it's amusing and easy to poke holes in it. The combat is shallow and broken, but not frustrating or unsatisfying on a pretty basic level. The voice acting is cheap, cheesy, and wholly inconsistent. I'm not sure just how many countries made it to Mars, but it hasn't been so long that they've homogenized the accent yet. I was at first disappointed with the short length, but I came to appreciate it being a tight package when I replayed it. I did end every chapter wondering where the fuck they were going with it, and it doesn't outstay its welcome or drag heavily. The one where the author clearly likes it and wants it to succeed, beyond just making back its costs. If you can get it on sale and want a cheap laugh, I would recommend Mars.
I'll be staying here for a while regardless, just to see how things pan out. Because I know the conflict is far from over.